Hello BookTube, Sarah here and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm coming to you with my 2017 Bookish Year in Review. So yeah, this is going to be fun. I kind of alluded to me doing this kind of really fun video and I had some grand ideas for it, and you know, I think the ideas were better in theory than in execution, if you will. So I've kind of changed it around a little bit, and I've been watching some other people doing their top 10 videos and different 2017 book surveys and things like that, and I've kind of accumulated everything together along with the data that I already accumulated myself, and I have been accumulating information about my books since the 1st of January 2017. So anytime I finished a book, I kind of updated the sheet that I had, you know, if I especially liked a book or didn't like a book, or there was something about the book I liked, or whatever the case may be. So I have a lot of different information, and essentially what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be talking about my Goodreads stats, because I do have it up here on my tablet so I can share it with you guys. And then I'm going to jump back and kind of answer some very specific questions about different types of books, and just different questions. I saw this on Books and Law's channel, and I took some of the questions out that she answered and I added in some of my own. And then at the very end of this video, I'm going to be going through the books that had my favorite covers of the year, because I think that definitely deserves recognition. I know we shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but in some cases, like the art department of these publishing houses do a brilliant job, and I think that they need to be recognized. And of course, the last thing I'm going to talk about are all my top 5, or are all my 5-star reads for 2017. I didn't want to do a top 10 list. I didn't want to do a top 17 list. You know, I looked at all the books that I had given 5 stars to this year, and I've decided to let you guys know what they all are. You could very easily go and check it on Goodreads, but you know, why not? Let's talk about it now. So, to start off with, Goodreads stats. I finished a grand total of 195 books in 2017. That blows me away. You guys have no idea. A grand total of 51,523 pages. Amazing, amazing. My shortest book that I read this year at 33 pages was Thanksgiving Dream by Courtney Hunt. That was book 11 in the Love at the Coffee Shops, or Cupid's Coffee Shop series. And the longest book that I read this year was The Valley of Amazement by Amy Tan, and that came in at 589 pages. That was a really, really great historical novel. If you're a fan of Amy Tan, definitely check that one out. I listened to it on audio, and it was absolutely fantastic. The most popular book on Goodreads that I read this year was Water for Elephants by Sarah Gruen, and it has 1,543,386 other people have read this book. My least popular book was Breakfast with Santa by Pamela Browning, and that only had 17 people who've read that book. My average rating throughout the entire year was 3.4 stars. And my highest rated book on Goodreads, now this isn't the book that I rated the highest, this is the book that I read that had the highest rating on Goodreads, was The Christmas Hope by Donna Van Leer at 4.31 stars. It's pretty good. So yeah, and then it just goes through, of course, all the books that you read throughout the year. So that was kind of fun, my Goodreads stats. The other one little stat I want to add that I kept track of myself was my best reading month was December, and I finished 22 books in December. So that's pretty freaking amazing. So let's jump into these little questions. So the first one is, the most read genre was, of course, contemporary romance. That one kind of goes without saying. Most read author. Now, I have to add a caveat to this. I took out Ann M. Martin, who, of course, authored The Babysitter's Club. I also took out Heather Graham because, of course, I'm reading through the Crew of Hunters series one book at a time. I also took out Courtney Hunt because I was reading through one of those books every month. I took those ones out because those I was reading with a purpose. I wanted to look at more of the authors I just happened to pick up, the ones I gravitated towards. Does that make sense? And that author at 7 books this year was Jill Shalvis. So that's pretty exciting. I've just recently come into reading her. I think I'm familiar with who she is. I was familiar with who she is. I may have read 1 or 2 books by her in years past, but this year it really, I really got into reading her stuff, and I've thoroughly been enjoying it. A book that lived up to the hype, and I do have to say that was Water for Elephants, like I said, by Sarah Gruen. This is one I wasn't sure I was going to enjoy. I can't remember why I decided to pick it up, but I grabbed it on audio, and I thoroughly, thoroughly enjoyed it. And everybody that I knew It seems, I mean, it's the highest read book on Goodreads that I read this year. Everybody has read this book except for me. It's one of those ones. My mother and, my aunt and all that, they're all telling me that it was such a great book and I needed to read it. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So it absolutely lived up to the hype. And I'm so thrilled that I read it this year. The book that did not live up to the hype for me was The Snow Child by L1 Ivy. Maybe it just wasn't my type of book. This book was going around BookTube a couple years ago, and everybody was talking about it, and everybody was saying what a great book it was. It's a lot of magical realism. It was okay, but I didn't love it. I didn't think it was spectacular. It was an enjoyable read, and if you want to read it, definitely check it out, but it's not one I would write home about, let's put it that way. The next one. Book that you felt was your biggest accomplishment. I wasn't too sure about this question. I saw, again, from Books and Law Law's channel, she had this question. But, I mean, to read a book for an accomplishment, now, I mean, if I read War and Peace, or if I had read, something like that, I could absolutely see that being an accomplishment. I don't really read classics or anything like that. So I decided that, yes, I do actually have an answer for this, though. My biggest accomplishment is finding new authors. I used to tend to stay very close in my little bubble, and I would read just certain books by certain authors. And, I still do that. I still have the authors that I absolutely love and will always gravitate back towards. But because of the Triple RC Challenge, and every month they give you a different featured author, a lot of the months I did my best to try and actually read that author. And I'm really pleased that I did. Because of that, I have now been exposed to new authors, and it's absolutely fantastic. So, for example, Sabrina Jeffries I read for the first time this year, Nalia Singh, and Serena Bowen. I mean, all of them, I now love their books and will definitely be continuing on with their series. And I'm really, really pleased at that accomplishment, that I'm finding my way out of my comfort zone and reading. I mean, these are still historical romances. They're still contemporary romances. It's not that far out of my comfort zone, but it's authors that I'm not familiar with, and I'm willing to take the time to invest to see if I like them, and lo and behold, I absolutely do. My favorite book couple this year, of course, was Maggie and Malone from Catch of the Day by Kristen Higgins. I just adore these two. They are probably one of my favorite book couples of all time. And yeah, I highly recommend you read that book. The book that you pushed the most people to read in 2017. I had a lot of conversations with people, and I kept coming back to these because it's not one book, it's a series. And every time I read another book, I kept telling you guys, you need to read this series. And I've told other people that, I really don't like historical romance. It's not my thing. Read these books. It's the Bridgerton series by, oh my gosh, Julia Quinn. Holy cow. Talk about drawing a blank. They are absolutely fantastic. They are funny. They are poignant. They are sweet. They're wonderful. The character development, the dialogue, they're all wonderful. If you don't think you like historical romance, please read a Bridgerton's novel and see if you don't change your mind. Next question. What book made you cry the most? That was the Next Best Thing by Kristen Higgins. She can make me laugh and cry. This one made me laugh but also made me cry. It's about Lucy, who's a widow, and she's trying to get over her brother's death, and she's having a relationship with her husband's brother, or her deceased husband's brother, and it's very, very complicated, but there's a scene at the end of this book that I've read it now 2 or 3 times, and every single time I break down into tears because it's heart-wrenching. And it's heart-wrenching, and it's uplifting at the same time, if that makes sense. It walks that fine line, but it really, really does bring tears to your eyes. At least it does for me. The book that made you laugh the most, another Kristen Higgins, and that was, again, Catch of the Day by her. Absolutely loved it. That book is hysterical. Favorite book by a debut author. This is one that a question that I put in here. Because I kind of wanted to acknowledge, like an author's first work, and that was Mr. Dickens and His Carol by Samantha Silva. I read this one in December, and it was fabulous. It was this author's first book. Highly recommend it. Definitely check it out. I waxed poetic about it in my last video with my weekly reads. Favorite newly discovered author. This is another question that I added in here, and that's Silver James. I started reading Silver James this year with the Red Dirt Royalty series, and, she writes contemporary romance for Harlequin for the Desire line. They're fabulous, fabulous books. I absolutely love this series. I do plan on finishing it off in 2018, like reading the rest of them, or reading up to whatever's been published, but thoroughly enjoy her. Great character development, great stories, great dialogue. You can't go wrong. She's fantastic. My favorite book that I reread this year was The Best Man by Kristen Higgins. This book I've read, I think, 3 or 4 times. It's one I go back to every few years to reread because it's such a wonderful story. But this year I listened to it on audio for the first time, and I absolutely loved it, and I highly recommend it. As you guys know, Kristen Higgins, big fan. Speaking of being a big fan of Kristen Higgins, one of the other things that I kept track of this year was opening lines in books. And I got this idea from Amber over at Amber Eats Books, and when she does like a wrap-up, she reads that first line out, and I think I might start doing that first line or first paragraph of a book, because it really does set the tone for the entire book. And, you know, I know with audiobooks that makes it more difficult, but you can go onto Amazon and grab the Kindle edition, and you can read that first page because you can get a preview. So that's how I captured this, because I did listen to this book on audio. But this first, like, opening paragraph just makes me laugh, and I do want to read it for you guys. And this is from Catch of the Day by Kristen Higgins, and I love it. Just shows you how great her writing is. Falling in love with a Catholic priest was not my smartest move. Obviously, I'm well aware of the whole vow of chastity married to the church thing. I realize that yearning for a priest doesn't exactly further the cause of meeting my future husband. And in case I have overlooked these little facts, I have an entire town pointing them out to me. So the opening line, it's great. It's absolutely great. I love it. Speaking of quotes and stuff like that, I do have a favorite quote. Again, I listened to this book on audio, but it's a quote that stood out to me, and I kind of paused it and went back, and I wrote this down so I wouldn't forget it. It's a dialogue exchange between Kate and Colin from The Viscount Who Loved Me by Julia Quinn, which is, I think, book 2 in the Bridgerton series. Again, a big fan of the writing of this series. And this quote perfectly, it's not the best quote but in the Bridgerton series that I've ever read, but it exemplifies the relationship between the characters and how great she writes dialogue and things like that. So I'm just going to share it with you guys right now. Kate cleared her throat yet again. Really, this was getting ridiculous. She was starting to sound like as if she swallowed a toad. It had occurred to me that you might be rather like your brother. That is all. My brother? The Viscount, she said, thinking it must be obvious. I have 3 brothers, he explained. Oh, now she felt stupid. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, too, he said with great feeling. Most of the time they're a dreadful nuisance. I mean, it's great humor. There's another great line in The Duke and I, which I read 2 years ago. It's the first book in the Bridgerton series. And the mother comes storming in, and she calls the boys a pack of, like, crazy sheep or something like that. I mean, it's just, the writing is great. The back and forth dialogue, please, please check this series out. I absolutely love it, and I cannot recommend it enough. So now let's get on to a little bit of audiobook stats. Total listening time. The great thing about that spreadsheet that I was telling you guys about in a previous video, it keeps track of your audiobook. So when you're like finishing a book, you put how long the audiobook was, and then it keeps track of that. So I had a total number of audiobook hours for this year of 526.3 hours of audiobooks that I listened to. Now, I listen to my books at average 1.75 speed, which broke down to actually about 300.8 hours of audiobook listening time this year. And I plan on doing a lot more than that in 2018. Because I was reading audiobooks since the beginning of the year, but I really didn't read them as much until the summertime. So, my favorite narrator this year, surprisingly enough, not surprisingly, I loved this. I loved her as a narrator. And that was Fanny Flagg. And she also took top spot for my favorite audiobook of the year, which is the All Girls Fill-In Station's Last Reunion, of course by Fanny Flagg. This was narrated by the author. Fabulous, fabulous book. It's a great historical fiction novel. It's both historical, taking place during World War II, with female pilots during World War II, and in more present day, with 2 kind of parallel storylines going. And Fanny Flagg did a brilliant job narrating this. The grandmother in this story, when she voiced her, because this does take place in the South, all I could hear in my head was Blanche from the Golden Girls, and I thought it was hysterical. And she did a brilliant job, and I absolutely recommend her, or recommend that book as well. But my most listened to narrator should come as no surprise if you know what my most read author was. And my most listened to narrator was Karen White. She narrates all of Jill Shalvis's books, and she narrated a couple of other books that I listened to this year, and they were all great. I absolutely adore her. She does a great job. You can listen to her and step away from the fact that you're listening to a book. You're not hearing the narration, you're hearing the story. And, you know, that's fantastic. But yeah, absolutely enjoyed her, and really, really glad that she was my most listened to for the year. All right, guys, I'm going to run through the rest of these books. Not super quickly, but I'm just going to share them with you. And they are my favorite book covers of the year. I will be posting pictures up here, of course. So the first one is The Witch's Daughter by Paula Braxton. Wasn't a huge fan of the book, but that cover is stunning. The next is The Bollywood Bride by Sonoya Dev. Beautiful, beautiful cover. The Best Laid Plans by Sarah Maybury. I really did not like this book, but sadly, or not sadly, that cover is just stunning. There's just something about it that really jumps out at me. The next is The All Girls Filling Station's Last Reunion by Fanny Flagg. Beautiful cover on that one as well. Juliet's Answer by Glenn Dixon. I thought this was a really, really nice cover. There's an alternate cover to this book, and I don't like it near as much as I like this one. Lost and Found Sisters by Jill Shalvis. There's just something about that beautiful blue, that gorgeous golden retriever, and that very summery kind of feel. I absolutely love this cover. The Bollywood Affair by Sonoya Dev also. Her covers of her books are just beautiful. I love this close-up of getting to see the henna and the jewelry and things like that. It's just stunning. Starry Night by Debbie Maycomer. This is one that I read at Christmas time. Another absolutely beautiful cover. I really, really like it. And last but not least was Mr. Dickens and His Carol by Samantha Silva. I love this cover as well. It's very simplistic, but really tells a story, and I think it's absolutely fantastic. And the last thing that I'm going to run through in this video is going to be my 5-star reads. I had 16 5-star reads for this year, and I am pleased with every single one of them. Again, I did not want to do a, most favorite to least favorite of my top 5 or my 5 stars. This is listed in the order that I read them. So keep that in mind. It's not like the last book is my most favorite or what have you. They are all 5-star reads for very different reasons, but hopefully within this list you'll find something that you might be interested in checking out in 2018. So we have, just to begin with, the very first book that I read this year, which was The Viscount Who Loved Me by Julia Quinn. Next up was Caught by You by Jennifer Bernard. And then it's The Valley of Amazement by Amy Tan. Fantastic on audio. If You Only Knew by Kristen Higgins. This is a newer novel of hers. Absolutely loved it. The All-Girl Fill-In Station's Last Reunion by Fanny Flagg, which I've been mentioning, of course. The next one was At Home by Bill Bryson. This is a nonfiction novel about how things in the house came to be in the house. Why do we have a couch? Why are there certain windows? Why do we do this? It was a really, really great book narrated by Bill Bryson. Next up was Juliet's Answer by Glenn Dixon, another nonfiction novel that I thoroughly, thoroughly enjoyed. Another nonfiction novel was Unmentionable by Therese O'Neill. I loved this book. It was so fantastic. If you're interested in all at what it was like to be a woman in the Victorian era, read this book, and it will not seem so wonderful as you may think it is. Or you may not think it is. The next one, To Sir Philip with Love by Julia Quinn, another book in the Bridgerton series. Then Talking as Fast as I Can by Lauren Graham. This was a memoir, and I really, really enjoyed it. I was never really a big fan of the Gilmore Girls. I have started watching it now, but it's not terribly exciting to me. But I still really was able to appreciate and enjoy this book. My One and Only by Kristen Higgins. Absolutely loved this one as well. The Best Man by Kristen Higgins. As you can tell, she's a favorite author of mine. The Best Man will always be a 5-star read to me. I absolutely adore it. Lost and Found Sisters by Jill Shalvis. Absolutely love that book. I thought it was fantastic. The next two, also both by Kristen Higgins. I'm pretty sure that every Kristen Higgins novel that I read this year got a 5-star. And that was The Next Best Thing, book 2 in the Gideon's Cove series, and book 3 in the Gideon's Cove series, Somebody to Love. And last but not least, my final 5-star read of the year was Mr. Dickens and His Carol by Samantha Silva. Of course, a great, great story about the time, kind of a fictionalized take on Charles Dickens writing A Christmas Carol. A great, great Christmas novel. Anyway, guys, that's my video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you kind of got some bit of information from this, and kind of got to see where my reading year was and things like that. I could have gone a bit more in depth, but I didn't want to overwhelm anybody. And yeah, so I really enjoyed doing this. Please let me know in the comments below if you had a favorite book of 2015 or 2017. I don't know why I have 2015 on the brain. if you have a favorite book of 2017, and let me know what it was. And yeah, I will talk to you guys in my next video. Until then, take care and happy reading, everybody. Bye.